This galley is going into a midi-me, a long wheelbase Mercedes Metris. We are using a plywood carcass for a galley module. Instead of the 80/20, we're using a combination of 80/20 and 3/4 plywood. This wood is from Spain. This is a lightweight plywood from a company called Garnica. It's extremely lightweight, it's very stable, and what we've done is we've developed a system on the CNC machine where we cut out these partitions. We call these hoops because they're hollowed out where we don't need material. So we're saving weight without compromising the strength. When you have curves like this, you spread the load across the whole member. If we had corners, you would have weak spots. But with curves, think of arched bridges, right? I told you about my people, the Italians, making arched bridges. All of the assembly is done with dados and rabbets in the back. On the CNC machine, we cut out these shapes. We also, at the same time we're cutting the shapes, we cut dados and rabbets where they are needed. Now, a dado is just a big channel in the wood, and then this piece fits in that channel. The humble professor is going to give you a little tutorial on splines and dados and rabbets. Oh my. This is a spline. It could be a piece of wood, could be a piece of aluminum, it really could be anything. MDF works well. Masonite. We basically mill down this material to a certain height and a certain thickness so that it fits snugly into an 80/20. See that? And now if you look in the end, you can see that we fill the channel. We fill the 80/20 channel with that spline. See? I hope you can see that. And you can see how much is being revealed on this particular spline, right? Now this spline can be used a number of ways. Right here is one particular way we're using it. This corner piece of 80/20 is being held in place with a spline, okay? Now, when we do this for real, the spline will be full length from top to bottom. I'm using a smaller one for demonstration purposes. Okay, so you see how the spline fits into the groove that we put in the end of the plywood. And it's not in the middle of the plywood. There's very little wood left out here, but there is just enough. Once this gets all glued together, we regain our strength and this thinness wouldn't matter. So we glue this spline into that piece of wood, and then we glue our 80/20 channel into that spline. Look at that. Now, once that all gets glued together, it's not going anywhere. I love to say that. I had Melissa from Minnesota here for her Tighten Up the other day, and I was doing something, and I got it all done, and I was checking it out, and she says, "That's not going anywhere." Pretty nice, huh? Over here is another example. I've got this panel reveals our gray tank, which is going to actually be right up in the front here because we have a wheel well behind it. But now I've got full access. If I take this drawer out, I've got full access to this bottom of the sink, the drain, the trap, my filters, everything that's in here, full access. I put a spline in the bottom of this panel, okay? See it in there? Couple of magnets up in the corners, see those? And we make our own steel brackets, any size we need. This goes in like that. Spline goes into the 80/20 channel, and there it is. I love that. That's not going anywhere. That brings me to the next section of the humble tutorial, dados. See these guys? A dado is basically a channel in the wood, okay? It just so happens, and it's no coincidence, that that channel is the same width as the plywood, 3/4 plywood. So you can see what happens now. That dado, that channel, this is basically a big spline situation. It's very similar. So you create that dado, and then your wall goes into it. Let me show you this relationship up here. Look at how tight that is. Can you see that grain structure? You see what's going on in there? Now, once you glue this together, the glue's not going to fail. The glue joint's not going to fail. The wood fibers would fail before the glue joint. Now, imagine that. All of those vertical hoops that are in this module now, this new plywood module, they are in a dado in the floor, they're in a dado in the top, they're in a dado in the back, three-sided, locked in. The face here is open, as you saw, and on the ends, we have what's called a rabbet. A rabbet is just like a dado, but it's on the end of a piece, okay? It doesn't have the two sides. It's not shaped like a U. It's not a channel per se. See that? This is not new construction. This is not something that we invented, okay? This is woodworking 101, all right? It's very, very strong. It's not your typical cabinet box construction. That's for sure. They would just really put plywood pieces together and staple them. Maybe screw them. I don't know many that would go to the trouble to put these dados in place and glue it all up and hog out. Yes, that's what we call it. We hogged out this material. See, so we cut this all away. This rectangle, this square here is for the sink. This is actually the top of a maxi-me galley. Your sink goes in that big hole, and then these two cutouts are simply removed to save weight. But they're removed in a specific manner, shape, and size, so we can work with them. As I said, these cabinets, these drawer glides, all have a very specific landing place on the hoop. And so now we can create galleys. We can create any length galley we want. In our big vans, all the galleys are the same height. It's a standard 36-inch height countertop. And we go with either a 3/4 or a 1-inch or an 1.25 inch countertop, depending on what the style and flavor of the van build is. So they're all the same height. They're basically the same depth. So the only thing that's going to vary is the length and what are we putting in each of these bays. This is 1, 2, 3, 4 bays in this galley. This is a tower of drawers. This is a drawer and a panel, microwave and a little storage. Behind here is our water tank. And because the water tank was able to get pushed up all the way to the rear of the galley, it left us with this nice little storage cubby. Waste not a space, want not a space. Even here, this is right in front of the sink. Okay, there's not a lot of room there, about that much. But we went to the trouble, instead of putting in a panel and just block it off, we gave you a little cubby up here for dish soaps and whatever else you want to put in there. It's pretty cool. You glue that all up and you clamp it, it's automatically squaring itself. It can only square itself because it's in all these dados. It's precisely cut on the CNC. Once you put that back, the top, you lock it all together, boom, you're square. Why are we doing this? Why have we changed from 100% 80-20 to a combination of 80-20 and plywood? Cost, speed of building. We can get this galley built and glued together in a half a day. We can get it cut out of a sheet and glued together in a half a day. That includes splining our 80-20. Some people would say they don't want the wood, they don't want an organic material, they want it to last 100 years. Well, that's great, but the van's not gonna last 100 years, okay? The van might last 20 or 30 years. And we know from looking in old houses that wood lasts a lot longer than that. So I'm not concerned about that. I'm not concerned with moisture and warping and tweaking. It just can't happen. We've got a good, strong plywood, and we've dadoed it into itself. Like that's what a dado, that's the concept of a dado, is you've locked it all together. The first step is to cut a series of short pieces with concave ends using a drill press with a Forstner bit and a stop fence. These concave ends will later form the radius or rounded ends of the drain slots in the shower floor. Now we move over to the table jig, where the pieces are assembled. A long piece, just slightly longer than the shower pan itself, is set into the assembly jig. Then the short concave pieces are positioned in the spaces provided. And another long piece is set up against the short row. Normally, we would be gluing all these steps, but here, for demonstration purposes only, we are not gluing anything. This represents one row of the floor. Now that we have completed one row, we move over to the multiple jig station. Here, we can add to the single row, and then add to that double row to make a triple row, and so on until we have enough assembly to fit through the planer. With all the rows glued together, we pass that assembly through the planer. The planer planes or shaves off the top of the wood assembly. First pass will take away all the high tops. Second pass will tend to smooth and even out the entire surface. The floor is sectioned in half to enable easy removal from the shower pan floor. The entire floor is supported on its underside. And there are key tabs to aid in lining up the two halves. Once the finishing is completed, we will install rubber feet all across the bottom